Okay, this week we're talking about salvation. And not just talking about salvation, but what difference it should make in our lives once we know we are saved. We'll talk about a couple things this week as we go through our series. But the biggest thing is that once we know that Christ is in our lives, we don't just sit around twiddling our thumbs, as the study says. There's something that we can do about it. And it should come naturally because of what we've experienced in our lives with Christ coming into our life. So let's take a deeper look at that. Okay, let's start off with a few questions. First one, has anybody ever depended on you to do a major task, and what did that look like? When I was a kid growing up, one major task that I had to do that was required was cleaning the yard when spring came along. It was a big task. You had to make sure you pulled all the weeds, got everything out of there, and you had to rake the lawn. My goodness, raking a lawn is something else. It's such a big task. So you do every single part, and I remember early when I was doing major tasks, the thing that I always knew was if you did it wrong the first time, you had to do it again anyways. So that's why and how that worked really well for me. So answering the second question, how did you complete the task? I did it right. The first couple times I didn't, but after a couple years I got to the point where I knew if I didn't do it right, they were going to make me go and do it again. So just piece by piece, got the raking done, got the job done, and the front yard looked pretty good for the season. So it was a pretty good task. Let's get into the Bible a little bit more about what this idea of salvation and how it should impact our lives. In order to do this, I want to tell a story. And it requires each one of us to imagine this. But you're a prisoner of war. I know that sounds pretty harsh to begin with. But anyways, you're a prisoner of war. And you've been stuck there for months. You've been in this imprisonment for a long time. And the time has come. They've actually said that they're going to execute you. Even harsher. It's even more insane now. But anyways, you're put in this situation. You're going to get executed. And as you're going to be executed, you get placed in the mud. You're sitting there. You're waiting for it. They say any last words like they always would, and you obviously don't say anything. If you're me, you're too afraid to say any words. And they start the countdown. They say ready, aim, and just before you're waiting for them to say fire, you hear it. The sound of a helicopter. A helicopter coming in, and these men come out of this helicopter and they set you free. You're taken away from this camp and you're brought into a safe place. And as you're brought to that safe place, oh my goodness, for the first time you're feeling free. Free from the struggle of walking through months in this obvious impending doom that you had in front of you. You're no longer going to be executed, but you're going to actually have hope and freedom in your life for the first time in months. And when you think about that story, you think, oh man, that's so good. You're going to get to do what you want to do. But the problem is, the difference in this story and in this situation is that you are recovered, but there's so many other people in this war that are still prisoners of war that they need help. So what happens is you get back to this safe place, and what they say is you need to go out there and you need to start to help other people. And for most of us, I think, when we think about the idea of being part of this mission field, this mission idea to go in and help people, I think we wouldn't flinch. We would jump all over that. We'd be like, yeah, I want to be this person that comes in and saves people. So how does that work? What does that look like in your life? As you think about the idea of you being saved and interacting and connecting with God, I think we can parallel a couple of these things. Yeah, maybe it's not like being a prisoner of war and being executed. Maybe it looks a little bit differently than that. But those of you that know what it means to have true freedom from your sin and death in your life, I think we can feel a little bit of that hope when we experience Christ for the first time. So let's take a look at the Bible. We're going to look at John 9 and see a story of a man that's actually he's blind at the beginning. But Jesus comes and does something miraculous in his life. So let's take a look at this. So after reading through that, after reading John 9, there's a really cool story about this man who is set free from his blindness. And after receiving his sight, He was asked a whole bunch of questions, and they just wouldn't believe him. They wouldn't believe that he received his sight. But Jesus said at the very beginning of the passage, I don't know if you caught this, he said that this man had received his sight to show God's glory. And he was placed in this situation so that he could show God's glory through his life. Let's ask some of the questions that we have here. What do you think you would do if you experienced what the blind man experienced? I know for me, if I was blind and I received my sight and I hadn't seen anything in a while, I know for some of the videos that I've seen online where people begin to see colors even or other things, they begin to cry because it's something so beautiful. We were meant to see, and not being able to see for a long time, finally being able to see and comprehend things. Oh my goodness, it's just a joy. It would change my life. You might not have had a blindness healed by Jesus, but have you ever had an encounter with Jesus that is worth sharing with others? I have. I've had a bunch of encounters with Jesus that have been worth sharing with others, and I think of all of them, and they're all valuable because each one of them have an experience that I've had with God that has just really transformed the way that I look at the world and helped me to have a better grasp on how God works in it. So that's been cool. One being my back got healed when I was a kid growing up. And that was really cool because my back hurt for a long time. And then I went to a church service and I asked for healing and for prayer. And I didn't really know what to expect, but God really transformed my life. And it was a really cool experience. You can ask me later about it if you want to. Why do you think that the young man's parents didn't want to speak for him? What was the consequence of confessing Jesus to be the Christ? Well, the consequence for this could have been some very big trouble for him. But I think God actually placed the young man in that situation because he was meant to share the good news. He was meant to share the hope that he had. Parents is secondhand. Parents weren't there. Parents weren't the ones that were blind, his parents. It was him. And just like when we get rescued or have hope put into our lives, it's hard to secondhand give people hope. It's easier when you're the actual one that received the hope. So it's better, actually, I think, that this guy was able to do that. I'm going to leave the last question. You guys can ask that if you want to. But I'm going to move on to the next section. Let's take a second look at the idea of salvation. There's a man named Stanley Williams. If you don't know much about his story, I'll give you a little bit of an overview of what happened in his life. Stanley Williams had a rough childhood. His dad left when he was really young, left him and his mom, and he actually lived in the hood in Los Angeles when he was growing up. And as he was growing up in Los Angeles, he got recognized for winning a lot of street fights, got himself into a lot of trouble, but also grew a lot in, I guess, his rapport, his notoriety, what he was known for, was built a lot in his ability to fight people and get into street fights and win all of them. So he was known for the crime and the bodybuilding that he was into. He's this really jacked, buff guy. And in time, he actually took control of a gang. He found a gang called the Crips. And we know this, sometimes some of us know this title, the Crips and the Bloods. That's where this story kind of originates from. And it was a vicious gang anyways. And this leader of this vicious gang was known and developed in this very distinct role at the top of this crime network. And over time, his crime's notoriety got big enough and he got caught. And he got sentenced to jail time. And not only that, he got sentenced to be executed. That's not where the story ends for Stanley Williams. His story actually continues as he was in jail and connected with other people. He experienced this life-changing conversion. He experienced Christ. He got to know who Jesus was. And he led a new mission in his life. He no longer was about, creating gang animosity and killing other rival gangs. He was actually involved in some really cool stuff. What happened in his life while he was in prison is he actually started to write to these other rival gangs. And he started to create this peace between him and this other gang called the Bloods. And as he spent time doing this, he actually helped to save a lot of people. because these gangs would not only hurt each other, they would hurt innocent people too. But them connecting and finding ways to find common ground made it so that the streets were a lot safer. In fact, he got so much notoriety on the good end, he was actually nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize because of his letters and his means of helping to develop this safe neighborhood, this safe space between these two gangs. And despite all of this major change that happened in his life, he still, in fact, was executed in 2005. But William's life had a change in it. You see, he grew up in a really rough situation, and his life continued down that rough road. But when he was converted and when he met Christ, the transformation that happened in his life helped to save other people's lives. Not only that, it made a legacy. It made a legacy that highlighted the power and importance of being saved for a mission. So, looking at his life a little bit closer, we're going to ask a couple questions here. How important is having a God-given mission for your life, and why? For some of our students, this might not be that close of a question because they don't have a God-given mission yet. They haven't accepted Jesus into their life. But for some that do, and maybe some that haven't really found out, this could be a really big question: is God given you a mission to facilitate in your own life? And if you don't feel that he has, why? Why does it feel like he hasn't given you a God-given mission? Because Scripture tells us very specifically he has. And we need to start sticking Scripture back into our context. So if you have students that are kind of wrestling with the idea of experiencing who God is, I would just stop here and be able to say, do you feel that God has given you a mission for your life? Because if they don't, we need to help to instill that in their lives. And what are some of the things that God has in store for people who follow him? I think God's got a lot of great things in store for people. It's not just things, it's actual activity and opportunity. As we see the church getting formed, we see gifts being given. We see the Spirit instilled in people's lives. We see power given to people and this amazing amount of confidence to be able to share that Jesus Christ is Lord. And in doing so, then other people get saved. Just like that story, remember at the beginning, when we talked about the idea of being a prisoner of war, coming back, being rescued, and then being sent out again to bring hope to others. It's the same idea. Our hope is something that we can share with so many other people. And you guys can ask the other questions too there. There's a lot of really great things that come out of those questions. But I think really for some of our students that aren't there yet, we need to build into the confidence that God has given us a mission. And this mission is so powerful when it comes to our lives. Okay, the next piece, living it out. Our life missions statement. Now for some of you, you guys might be looking at this and saying, how am I going to incorporate this into my group? It's really simple for us to do this. What is the purpose? What are you living for? Is kind of the idea of this. A life mission statement is something that you use to build every decision that you make off of. The examples that they give here, they have, the mission statements of Walmart, Google, Starbucks. I really like the Starbucks one because I think it's really true. To inspire and nurture the human spirit, one person, one cup, and one neighborhood at a time. When I walk into a Starbucks, I clearly see this experience where you can sit down, enjoy, spend some time doing whatever you're doing, and you just feel relaxed. You feel this sense of just building and in being inspired to do what you're trying to do when you're there. I don't know how they do it. I don't know what it is, but you just feel like you really are taken care of there. So that's something. For me, my mission statement has always been to find the potential of young people and to help them to see God's plans and purposes for their life. And in doing so, I want to help students to see the potential that they have in themselves and then execute that potential, what they're meant to do. Same idea as this salvation message, is just finding the potential and then exploiting it for what God wants to do in students' lives so they can bring hope to others. That's my mission statement. If I was put it in like a little form, seeking potential and developing leaders is really kind of how that works. So a couple questions that you have to ask while you're doing this with your students is, what is the absolute most important thing to you? If it's not important to a student, they're not going to do it, and it's not going to mean anything to them. It's got to mean something to them. I think for doing this, the biggest thing is they can use key verses, they can use core values, all of that stuff. But I think really you just have to like kind of maybe even get into smaller groups within your group and spend time deliberately with one-on-one or two people at a time. Doesn't really matter, but however you do it, you need to spend time really getting into what's important to each student. If you don't know what's important to them, they're not going to be able to build this very well. But it's very important that they do this because it gives students an opportunity to just kind of connect with a mission for their life. And I think God's already placed a mission in their life that works along with his goals for what he wants to see them do in their lives. That's just going to fulfill them in so many ways. And finally now, we have the application. Pretty simple, but I think there's two angles that we'll have to take as a leadership for this one. First one is for those students that have already accepted Jesus in their lives and are living in maybe a Christian home, or those that are just continually living in their Christian walk, is what are you doing with your salvation? And is it living and active in the way that you live your life? How can people see your attempts at showing them hope, attempts at rescuing others from the fate that you once had? The second one is, what does Jesus look like to you? What does he mean to you? And can you take the salvation message for what it is? I think for this one, we can look at the idea of John 10:10. Jesus came to bring us life. The enemy came into our lives to kill, steal, and destroy, but Christ came to bring us life. So you can take those two angles of this topic. Maybe talk to the students that are in a place where they want to apply this to their lives a little bit further. Use that statement that they just made and make a little bit more of a push to showing others the hope that they have in their lives. And for others, maybe it's just helping them to see hope for the very first time and maybe asking further questions on what are some of the things that maybe are stealing, killing, destroying some of the stuff in their lives, and where do they need to find hope to. So a little bit of a different application today. Again, they can write this stuff down if they want to. They need to be specific on the goals. What are you going to do about it? When are you going to do it? Is there someone that can keep you accountable? I think for this one, if people are trying to show Christ in their life more and the hope that they have in him, it could just very simply be an opportunity for you guys as leaders to just start saying, how can you share your hope with other people in very practical ways? So make that kind of their application and mission moving forward. Again, built into that statement that they made just a little while ago. Okay, that's it. We're done for this series. We'll be moving on to the next one very shortly. Thank you guys for your awesome work, and we'll be back to talk about the next series very soon. Peace out.